Hey everyone, wherever you're watching us from, this is The Big Picture. I'm your host, Justine Wenda, and with me is
Tom Mukwana.
And today we have a very special guest. His name is Andrew Franklin. He is an experienced managing director with a demonstrated history working in security and in the investigations industry. He has a Juris Doctor, which I don't know what it is, from the New York Law School, focused on international law and legal studies. He also served in the U.S. Marine Corps. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you for having me.
Did I nail your intro, or am I missing a bunch of things? This is your opportunity.
Well,
to
unless
just,
you wanted
review.
to take most of the show.
No, it's okay. We can take most of the show just
but you can
reading.
talk about how I spent 10 years with Planned Parenthood Federation of America, shipping contraceptives all around Africa and running audits, and how I first arrived in Africa, in South Africa, and up to southern Rhodesia.
Okay.
Ooh.
He's
When was
worked.
That was in 1978. And I arrived in southern Rhodesia in the period between the time when the freedom fighters shot down 2 civilian aircraft.
Oof.
That is a long time. You've been alive for a long time, and I am very respectful of that. So I will not call you old. I will call you experienced.
I'm very pleased.
Yes, I'm trying to be fair today.
I like what's going on here.
Yeah, I'm trying to be fair today. So our focus for this episode is particularly given how we've seen the United States currently being led by Donald Trump. You guys did that. As an American, just first, before we get into everything, how are you doing?
Oh, it's a horrible situation, and I was on one of your broadcasts in 2016 saying that I did not vote for Trump, that I actually voted for Hillary Clinton. I voted for a Democrat for the first time.
Yeah.
I also mentioned how the Electoral College works, which is to stop someone from Trump from getting into power, to stop a demagogue. I voted for Biden. I never, just because of I wasn't going to vote for Trump. The man is anathema to everything I've come to believe in, and what I also realized is I did believe in even when I thought I was a right-wing Republican many years ago.
Yeah.
So it's a horrible situation, and what's happened in the last 8 months, I've had acquaintances who no longer have jobs at USAID. There are countries all around Africa have been devastated by the fact that USAID just shut, has shut. And the fact that AGOA may have been extended for Kenya is irrelevant, but because eventually the tariffs will come in. And again, and whatever he says, it's every day there's something new and desperate.
Yes.
And dangerous.
Does he just not sleep, or is it a default setting to just keep talking? He's running the country like a podcast, and I think maybe they should just shut the TV off, give him a couple of days on the golf course, just let him chase a ball.
No, you really can't ignore him, because there are people around him who are implementing what he wants to do. If you have an unqualified individual as the Secretary of War now, and he calls 800 generals and admirals to find their way to Quantico, Virginia, the Marine Corps base, so that he could give a pep talk. And you have all these generals, and I'm sure some of them are in fact Trump supporters, and especially the senior enlisted. There was a very sizable amount of troops who were Trump supporters. Yeah. And between COVID and Trump and the vaccinations, there's a lot of hostility. Yeah. I never realized you could turn down a vaccination if you were in the Marine Corps. We would get 16 in one day. Never occurred to me to say no. So Trump said, yes, you can do that. So what he has been doing, and the people around him, there are people who believe in what he's saying, and there's 73 million Americans who voted for him and are not disappearing.
Yeah.
It's a very serious situation, and people are now referring to it as fascism.
Yes.
We're watching the Immigration and Customs Enforcement people running a Black Hawk Down repelling mission into Chicago, picking up people who don't look American. The fact is that 60% of my rifle company in the Marine Corps a long time ago were of Hispanic origin or people of color.
Yeah.
We even had a Portuguese kid whose parents had fled from Angola when the communists took over there.
Yeah.
So we've had loads and loads of immigrants, green card holders, first-generation immigrants.
Yeah.
We couldn't have had a Marine Corps without them.
Yeah.
And that's 40 some odd years ago.
It's worse now.
Okay.
So sure, more people.
Because America, at least for most part of the world, people knew it as a melting pot of different cultures and almost very welcoming to different people, different backgrounds, all these different histories. And then when you get to America, you're just American, at least in the dream sense. But right now we're seeing that landscape shift. There's a lot of different politics playing out. But then one of the things that just recently came out, at least to the shores of the African nations, is aside from tariffs, I'm so sorry, Lesotho. Apart from tariffs, what we're seeing showing up is also removal of any kind of military assistance, or at least depleting the contacts that were in place. So we saw during the UN General Assembly, and also the meeting with the generals after, where the Secretary of War, which you have now, was was shouting no fighties and all these different mean things. We saw the president of the arguably the most powerful nation in the history of the world come out and say we don't need to have troops in Kenya and Somalia. What does that mean for the security of this region?
Okay, well, he actually questioned what we're doing, what the U.S. is still doing in Kenya and Somalia. And you remember that towards the end of his first term, he withdrew all the U.S. troops, about 500 or 600 of them, who were based inside Somalia, supporting the federal government of Somalia in its war against al-Shabaab. And they were moved into Manda Bay in Lamu, and then also to a new base in Wajir, which is very extensive. And then they would just fly in and fly out until President Biden was elected, and then he replaced them. But the real question is, what are our interests in Somalia? Why are we fighting al-Shabaab?
Yeah.
Which, after all, and Kenya as well, has been actively involved in combat against al-Shabaab since 2011, when KDF invaded Somalia. So 14 years later, al-Shabaab is able to detonate a huge explosion at the National Intelligence Service prison in Mogadishu, and is also taking back more and more of the rural areas that may have been liberated in the last year or two. On the other hand, the one threat to the U.S. and to other countries is the ISIS, Islamic State group, who are operating in Puntland and use Puntland as a headquarters for all their financial transactions, for coordinating activities in eastern Congo with the Allied Democratic Forces, and also in Cabo Delgado in northern Mozambique. Now, one of the problems that ISIS poses to the Kenya is also because of the continuing ferment among Islamic groups in northeast Kenya and then along the coast. And depending on the fragility in Tanzania, the ISIS can recruit according to, in that country as well, in Tanzania. Yeah. But I think as far as what the United States is doing, it's a sideshow. It's
what
a
do you
sideshow.
mean a sideshow?
Well, we have, to be perfectly honest and with all due respect for all of our generals, they're given orders to bomb. They were given orders to bomb Yemen. I mean, our Secretary then of Defense, now War, was, he had sent the orders to a reporter on his Signal chat, and gave away, we're going to be bombing the Houthis here and there, and that's true. But the Houthis have been hanging on. We supported the Saudis and the United Arab Emirates, who were fighting the Houthis, not very successfully, and also recruiting Sudanese mercenaries to fight the Houthis. They've hung on, and they control much of Yemen. Yeah. So, but if you give orders to bomb them, they will. If there's nobody going to say no. When we bombed Iran, the question was, well, how effective it was. Anybody who's questioned the effectiveness of those airstrikes seems to have been retired, seems to have been moved elsewhere. Yeah. And that was just like the earliest signs of people getting the hatchet or getting the axe for disagreeing. But by the same token, we had never used our B-2s in an actual situation, and we managed to bomb Iran using B-2s that have been around for over 25 years, very expensive stealth bombers.
So is it, can we bring this particular issue up as military experiments instead of military expertise?
No, it's actually just it's like having a machine that's running. The machine that runs to prosecute wars is what we first saw during the Vietnam era, which was the era I cut my teeth in, where you treated a war as a factory, and people were interchangeable, and you had draftees. We had at one point almost 600,000 people in South Vietnam, and then another scores of thousands everywhere else, but focusing on Vietnam. And it was run with body counts, targets. It was not a traditional campaign.
Yeah.
There was no grounds being taken, which maybe is true when you're fighting insurgents or guerrillas.
Yeah.
But we weren't clearing anything, and we weren't holding anything either. As a result, the war just eventually petered out, and we left our allies, the South Vietnamese, stuck with an American-style military that couldn't be supported. And we just flew away in 1975, much as we did in Kabul, in Afghanistan, after in 2021, where we just flew away. So I think you're going to have people who are obeying orders. That's what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Now, this business of bombing boats, civilian boats. Now, this is those orders. Those may be or probably are illegal orders.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to be shooting civilians, killing civilians.
Yes.
We had a My Lai massacre in Vietnam that brought it to our attention, if we needed it, that we simply can't commit atrocities.
Yeah.
And so as a result, or go to jail. So a lot of the behavior that's been seen in Gaza in the last 2 years on the part of the IDF, as I've said to people, is stuff that would have lost me my commission in the Marine Corps and put me away.
Yeah. And I think, Tom...
I'm just curious to hear this. You've spoken of Vietnam.
Yes.
They didn't achieve the goal in Vietnam, obviously.
Well, the goal in Vietnam was a geopolitical goal.
The same thing here? Is it the same thing happening?
No, not necessarily, because what we managed to do, for better or worse, during the Cold War, and there's an outstanding article in The Elephant about how the war on terror has echoes of the Cold War, written by myself, that, we were concerned about much of Southeast Asia, the so-called domino theory, which in Indonesia, the government was overthrown by right-wing military who slaughtered 500,000 Chinese political dissidents and prevented Indonesia from falling to communism. Laos fell when we left South Vietnam, as did Cambodia, because we got them involved in that war big time. But Thailand did not. Also, and we were totally wrong about the North Vietnamese as far as we used to confuse them or conflate them with the Chinese. Just as we conflate any jihadist insurgent with Al-Qaeda or IS or anybody who calls himself an Islamic State or Islamic courts. If you remember the Islamic Courts Union, which took over in Somalia in 2007, 2008, they were the first functioning government that Somalia had. And had they called themselves the Jewish courts or the Baptist courts, Jende Fraser would not have solicited the help of the Ethiopians to overthrow the Islamic court. They had peace. So just having this knee-jerk reaction against Muslims, against Islam, is a great way to lose war.
That's one part. That's on the part of the U.S., right? And this strategy. But then what makes Somalia such a hard problem to solve for Kenya and for all those who are involved?
Well, it's a hard problem to solve because we don't know what the solution should be. We all know we'd like a stable country. But after 14 years of the KDF not being allowed to fight, AWESOM, ATMIS, AMISOM, supporting Somali National Army, which the Somali National Army is again consumed by interclan rivalries. And in fact, the question really is, in a country riven by such chaos and interclan competition, is it possible to have a national army? Wouldn't it have been better, as someone wrote in the Nairobi Law Monthly in 2014, to have a confederation of states in Somalia, where all these autonomous states, like Puntland, Jubaland, which seems to have an army, because they're sitting in Mandara, are able to arm their own people, but everyone is trained according to the same doctrines. Everyone wears the same uniforms. What federal government of Somalia needed was a Coast Guard, a robust Coast Guard, because Coast Guards do not threaten the people on shore. And they also, in Somalia, has a 1,000-kilometer coastline. They do have oil offshore, but they can't control any of it. And without a Coast Guard, it's just all wishful thinking about exploiting anything. And Kenya, every now and again, will lose a lawsuit against Somalia about who controls the maritime resources. Kenya is unable to exploit them.
Yeah.
And so is Somalia.
Yeah.
So the real question becomes, when do we say enough is enough in Somalia? In other words, what is the worst that could happen if we withdrew the KDF from Somalia into bases, forward operating bases all along our own border, with the mandate to strike into Somalia, just as they did in October of 2011, with the mandate to strike against anyone gearing up to strike into Kenya. There's no reason in the world why the fence lines, the watchtowers can't be constructed. It's not a wall. And these are the kind of tactics that have worked in many other insurgencies.
Yep.
And they had worked in many ways with the Israelis until they dropped their guard on Gaza 2 years ago.
So with Trump reneging, or like looking to renege, and we've seen this, just to contextualize it, Kenya's mission in Haiti, it was completely tied to Kenya being named as a non-NATO ally, and this was a big deal considering only 4 African countries are non-NATO allies in that particular capacity. It's Egypt, Tunisia, and Morocco. And Morocco arguably has one of the largest armies on the continent, and even their training is very well looked up at. So with the shift in the mission in Haiti, how does that translate particularly to how Kenya positions itself in the security that it's come so much to rely on, especially with the US? And also, how can the officers that were being deployed for missions way too far from home, maybe not even in the interests of the country in the long term, how can they be redeployed here to help with boost the Kenyan security system, and how will that work?
Well, you're correct that the sending what you should have been 1,000 administration police and GSU to Haiti, they should have been joined by another 4,000 members of other countries, but they never were. We only sent 700. They weren't all carrying rifles. That's not the way things work. And they spent 14 months keeping themselves alive, doing a creditable job without any real support, and in the face of history, which says that if it took the Marine Corps 20 years to pacify Haiti, 1915 to 1935, you don't achieve much of anything with 700 cops in a year. And so there's no reason in the world why the Haitian, when you have Trump talking about why are we spending time on the border of Somalia and Kenya, the real question now is, why is Kenya spending any time with 700 police in Haiti? It's not our problem. It is not Kenya's problem. We have problems that are closer to home that we know about, which is why we persist in keeping the KDF in Somalia, which is another thing that should be re-examined. But if somebody says to you, look, I don't know why we're on the border of Kenya and Somalia, listen to him. He already pulled the troops out of Somalia once before. He's going to do it again. The United States will not rise or fall on the basis of al-Shabaab. We in Kenya might suffer momentarily.
Could you break down how we suffer? Like, how would that look like? With
Kenya is viewed as an ally of the United States, like it or not. And whether or not the president goes and makes great statements about China, our friends, our relationship, and they're wonderful people, and they're great. They have great food. The point really is that, he gets no benefits. I mean, we get no benefits from the United States because of making statements in favor of China. If China is truly an honest broker, well, let's have them build. If they truly are building infrastructure that's needed. But the main infrastructure that's needed is the kind of stuff that's just gone bust or moribund, like LAPSET. The Chinese are interested in that sort of thing, and the Chinese would probably build a Somalia border control project if asked by the government of Kenya. And what is the United States going to do? And if the United States really needs 700 cops in Haiti, well, we have more than enough troops in the United States to send to Haiti, and we used to send them all the time. What is in the best interest of Kenya? And you see, when you mention this non-NATO ally, that allows Kenya access to certain intelligence briefings, possibly to being able to buy more advanced weaponry and the like. Kenya is still flying all U.S. equipment. Kenya is still driving all U.S. armored vehicles. If it's not U.S., it's British. There's nothing wrong about the training of the troops, the pilots, and the like. So then, what were the benefits of being a non-NATO partner? One thing that as you mentioned, Morocco, which is the first country in the world to recognize the United States when we revolted against the British. They were the first to exchange diplomatic relations.
Interesting fact.
In 1778. Morocco is still occupying what used to be called Spanish Sahara, the Western Sahara. You may remember that the first week of this administration in Kenya, the head of state said he supported Morocco's position on Spanish Sahara, on Western Sahara. And apparently the Sahrawi Democratic Republic, Arab Democratic Republic, which used to have a consulate or an embassy here, had to close it last year. And I mean, there used to be a sign, SADR, on the way to Gecko. So the point is, the first thing that was done was come down hard on behalf of Morocco, a good ally of the United States. What did Kenya get from that?
Okay, so is Kenya just banning its relationships to please the allies that it's trying to maintain for close to nothing, or can Kenya shift its positions to protect itself first and negotiate like as a sovereign partner? And how can this happen, considering with all these protections gone, how does Kenya reposition itself in the security system, in its in the allyship with its fellow countries, and in the grand scheme of allyship from country to country, continent to continent, superpower to superpower? Like, how does Kenya restructure itself in this particular system?
Well, Kenya has excellent allies and excellent troops, people who are trained very well. They're just not deployed properly. There seems to be no coherent national strategy that keeps us keeping 700 police in Haiti or keeps 3,300 troops in Somalia after 14 years. I think it's important to recognize that if it weren't for local interests, which clan interests that do cross the borders, which is why we drove to Kismayo at the end of 2011 into 2012, which was not the objective. And then we stayed. And it's all very well documented. And by the way, look, there's always a lot of waste and theft in war. Afghanistan is a perfect example of how contractors made a lot of money and we still lost. In fact, they would have made more money and then we would have lost. We decided we're not going to win because we invaded Iraq for some reason. And we gave up winning. We didn't have a strategy. So, and there's a lot of people who made fortunes in Afghanistan and also in Iraq. There are people who make money here on these deployments, security deployments, and a lot of that can be honest tenders. Honest above-board tenders, if you believe that. The problem is none of us believe these things anymore. But the fact is, the lack of accountability for deploying police to Haiti, the lack of where does the buck stop for keeping troops in Somalia never seems to be broached, especially in Parliament. What we've seen in Parliament as well is when the KDF were being deployed to northern Kenya, to the 6 counties in northern Kenya, they were deployed a day before Parliament resumed, and in violation of the Constitution, because the National Assembly is required to approve domestic security deployments of KDF within the country of Kenya. They didn't meet the vote. They never have voted. So, you know, we're looking at a situation where nobody's taking responsibility for sending brave men and women into harm's way.
So is it then a strategic problem, or is it that Kenya is confused about where to focus and what to do?
No, I don't think it's confused. I think that's unfair.
Yeah.
But the problem is whose interest is paramount? Private interest, selfish interest, the national interest. You know, the thing about, if you look at Sudan, which over the last 3 years has descended into one of the world's greatest unknown crises,
yeah.
There's a huge amount of money being made.
Yeah.
And between the rapid support forces, who apparently were allowed to meet in Nairobi to set up a government, a new government, who are now cooperating with the United Arab Emirates, which is a center of gold smuggling and gold trade in the whole region. Yeah. Not just in Sudan. Yeah. And they are backing the RSF, who many of those rapid support forces were mercenaries employed by the United Arab Emirates when they were fighting the Houthis, along with the Saudis in Yemen. So there's a lot of shadow activity going on involving things like gold.
Yeah.
And we know that, and also in the DRC. So there's a lot of stuff that we don't hear about much, we don't know, and yet it's not unusual.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tom, just to Andrew's point about RSF, we've seen the Kenyan government flagged for
the weapons.
For the weapons, where some of them were found in RSF was in possession of arms that were labeled as KDF weapons.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means for this country and what that means even in our own security and how it plays out. Because if KDF arms can end up in RSF possession and they're being supported by the UAE, it's not to say that those weapons cannot also be shipped around to a different part of the region in detriment to like the entire Kenyan security. Like we are kind of building our own hole, like digging ourselves into a hole where one thing doesn't just happen in isolation. It creates a pattern across the region. I don't know how Kenya is going to deal with this. Like, could you give us a little bit of a perspective considering?
I don't know how we're going to deal with that, honestly. Frankly, we'll be in a better position to say that. But for me, it looks like Kenya has its hands in everything wrong about the region. So Somalia, you're not fixing anything. You're mostly just staying there. South Sudan, mostly Sudan, actually, in this case. Sudan, the weapons that are used in the war against what some would call the legitimate authority in Sudan, which is SAF, and it's facing this fierce opposition with all the backing from all these foreign forces which have obvious interests in that country, and your weapons accidentally show up in the middle of a war zone and it's exposed, but then you don't say a thing about it, you don't speak about it, all you do is put out deepfake videos to support your positions in that country. I don't know, I can't look at it from a military perspective because I haven't been on that strategic side, but that looks terrible on Kenya because I think that has also been flagged by the US at some point, and other allies have called in to ask why this is happening. But also, again, the president and his accusations with Al-Shabaab in the north, some are very, should I say, unverified, especially because it's local politics. But Kenya seems to have its hand on everything wrong about the region, and all the allies that are considered, should I say, anti-Pan-Africanism and against the African interest, Kenya seems to align themselves with them. For instance, what you're seeing now in the wave of pro-Russian sentiment across Africa, whilst Kenya is expected to be on that wave, which has a lot of criticism to it as well, I'm not saying that it's the best side, we're seeing Kenya align itself with the US, which has its hands on multiple wars across the continent and also in the Middle East. So Kenya is positioning itself in a very dangerous territory. And you've seen a lot of African leaders fire salvos at the at the Kenyan administration for its recent decision diplomatically. But I want to hear what you have to say about that, Andrew.
Well, I would say that the Kenya Ordnance Factory in Eldoret produces a wide range of ammunition. And I believe during the Laikipia land invasions, when there were people like Kuki Goldman and others were being shot by armed Samburu tribesmen, that I think some of the personnel from Africa Uncensored who were actually filming up there came back with shell casings that were marked KOFS, that is Kenya Ordnance Factories. And I pointed out to your staffers that the ones that have the red circle around them are tracer rounds, and there's one tracer round for every 5 normal rounds. But they had picked these up off the ground at some of these invasions. The fact is that the factory in Eldoret, which was brought here from Belgium, reassembled to make ammunition for the Army's G3s, 9mm and the like, was retooled to make ammunition for a much more commercially viable AK-47, which is the favorite weapon of terrorists and children. And so it makes sense to retool, but nobody ever said we're retooling to make ammunition for AK-47s. There was a UN report into South Sudan that said that most of the ammunition and small arms fueling the civil war in South Sudan in 2013 originated in Uganda and Kenya. So this is not new. The only question is, how is it possible now that we're somehow involved? Well, who's involved? And you have to realize as well, one of the reasons for this incredible civil war in Sudan is actually for control of their economy. The Sudanese armed forces have patterned themselves after the Egyptian armed forces and control a sizable chunk of the economy in Sudan. In Egypt, the Egyptian armed forces own textile mills, they own farms, they own weapons manufacturing facilities. For all I know, they own hotels, shipping lines and the like. Big chunk of the economy, which is what Sudan started to do as well. So there's a big fight between the RSF and the Sudan army over who's going to really control the major chunk of whatever is left of the economy in northern Sudan. We also have a situation in Kenya where, besides the ordnance factory in Eldoret, the KDF owns Kenya Meat Commission now.
Yes.
You may remember that the KDF was given the job of trying to straighten out Nairobi. The KDF opened a factory to manufacture small arms about 2 years ago, and also registered a company to do civil engineering, even though they have a perfectly professional and excellent engineer regiment.
So the same thing happening here?
Well, yes. You see, this is a very similar pattern that you see in Zimbabwe, where the military controls a lot of that economy, what's left of that economy as well. And so there seems to be some impetus, and Uganda as well, where they assemble armored vehicles. So it's not unusual. It doesn't make it right. But everything seems to be getting done without any transparency. And without anybody saying, well, how do we benefit? We being the national interest.
Just to close this out, as we get into what the UN General Assembly looked like and what that will mean for the African future, what are the metrics of success, at least in the grand scheme of security? Kenya's position with the US, our struggles with the Somalia border. If there's a lot of war profiteering going on, people whose work cannot be verified, there's no trust in the system. As we were discussing earlier, where you were just telling me, like, a lot of the situations kind of fall flat despite the advice. Like, what are the metrics of success? What would that look like if Kenya were to reposition itself as a regional stronghold and just almost like a blueprint for security success, and to stop ongoing wars or to stop invasion into other sovereign countries, or just having the military be there for years without a stop to it? how will we measure our success in security?
We'd measure our success if we were able to put military-grade all-weather roads all throughout northeast Kenya, if we were able to stimulate the LAPSET project again, because there weren't concerns about security issues.
Could you just break down what the LAPSET project is?
LAPSET is the Lamu, Southern Sudan pipeline. And it's basically, it's a corridor, very similar to the Lobito corridor in Angola. And it's really supposed to link up with a new refinery in Lamu, 33 berths as a transshipment point, and to open up most of northeast Kenya. The question becomes, can you do that in a war zone? Can you do that if there's no investment in roads? A part of the Somalia border control project that I introduced in 2014 into 2015 had a lot of work in upgrading airstrips, all the existing airstrips there, not just fence lines, watchtowers, minefields, but also military-grade roads, and all within the context of allowing devolution, as per the Constitution, to take place in Mandera, Wajir, Garissa, Lamu County, and as well as Tana River. None of that progress has taken place, and you may know better than I, because I don't have a drone, but if the Jubilant security forces are still occupying parts of Mandera, well, that is all wrong. 2 or 3 years ago, then Governor Roba was putting on his Twitter feed pictures from Mandera itself showing how the Jubilant security forces and the Somali National Army were fighting it out in the streets. And he was saying, help. Whatever happened? So what we should see is how the Northeast can be pacified, how we can eliminate attacks on or reduce attacks on police posts, on GSU positions, on KDF and the like. We keep running these Operation Peace in Bonny Forest, and there's no peace. Ever since the Mpekatoni massacres, the inward investment into Lamu County has come to a halt. And every year we keep reporting how the U.S. Embassy or the UK High Commissioner, everybody says things like, oh, you can go to Lamu Island. Not necessarily Menda Island, but Lamu Island. But don't go there by land. Do not take a bus, do not drive from Malindi up to Lamu, which would have been fun. And which could have been done 30 years ago. On a bad road. But the point is, it's like we are abandoning portions of this country for no real reason, and without saying this is what we are doing and why we are doing it. Meanwhile, the kids don't go to school. The hospitals in northeast Kenya are not functioning.
Even in southeast Kenya.
Well, yes, but that's a different problem, I think. But if you look at an area where you need hearts and minds programs, you want the people to know they are part of Kenya.
Yes.
Right now, they're caught between Al-Shabaab, the security forces, clan leaders. To still have people dying in inter-clan conflicts in 2025 in Kenya. What are we, Central African Republic?
Maybe, yeah.
Well, no, you see, because in fact, we don't seem to be doing the things that were done during the emergency, the things that have been done elsewhere, the things that even were done during the shift of war. I'm not talking about massacres. I'm talking about detaining populations, secluding populations. And where are the roads? And so we have a lot of military equipment, some of which we were buying 5 years ago, a balloon, surveillance balloons that nobody has ever seen. Ambassador Kyle McCarter donated 30 or 40 Toyota Land Cruisers to the Border Patrol unit. We don't see any of these things. And they don't seem to be having an impact. And the troops in northeast Kenya, that is in Mandera, Garissa, seem to be noticeably absent when the Jubilant security forces cross the border. And yet their purpose is to defend the borders of Kenya.
Speaking of relations with other nations, Andrew, the United Nations General Assembly happened over the past week or two, and there was loud calls for African nations to get a permanent seat in the Security Council. Most of us don't even know what that does. So what does a permanent seat in the UN Security Council?
A permanent seat in the United Nations Security Council allows the holder to basically torpedo laws, to basically stop action that it views as being detrimental to its own interests. The 5 nations of the 5 permanent nations are the ones who won World War II, and then in the aftermath of which the United Nations was established. To expect China or Russia to give up or expand the number of votes on that council, which would diminish their own power, is a little bit idealistic, ambitious. So it's not like your friends are going to give up any power to let Kenya or Nigeria have a seat, a vote, so it can block any legislation. And you can always say, as they do almost every year, well, Britain's economy is no longer what it was. The French, who are they? You know, they don't even send troops to Africa anymore much. So why should they have a permanent seat and a vote? The fact that the Security Council was expanded to 15 and there's a rotating membership is more than enough for having a bully pulpit to getting your point across. The real question is, why doesn't Africa get its positions across? And then the question then comes, what is Africa's position on anything?
Is there an African position?
In my humble opinion, there isn't. There isn't. Because you're looking at a continent which, because of the amount of meddling, dating back a couple hundred years, and the fact that there's been internecine violence and wars, which are not only because of foreign powers, but aided and abetted by local interests. You will see that there's no common positions. I mean, everyone wants to have youth unemployment resolved. Everyone wants to have a Silicon Savannah everywhere, unless there's information that needs to be shut off. We have a non-performing community in Eastern Africa, and yet we're still keep talking about an Africa-wide trade bloc and all the potential. But there's always been potential in these blocs, and there's just as there was potential with AGOA. And where is it?
How is AGOA even utilized, at least for Kenya, even with the extension? How has AGOA been framed and how is it utilized?
That's a very good question. You see, it's a 25-year plan that if you just looked at one segment of products that you're able to export duty-free to 360 million Americans searching for bargains, just look at textiles if you want, we should be growing cotton like we did. Not merely at the coast as a pilot project, but also in Lake Victoria. That whole region was a cotton-growing region. We should be exceeding our coffee exports than we did in 1986. We should be manufacturing buttons and zippers, threads, dyes, and genuinely making clothing, if you're only going to concentrate on textiles. And even if you want to do as a former Chief Executive Officer of Kenya Association of Manufacturers said, let's look at honey. I don't think we're fully exploiting our honey market here when we're shipping stuff to the United States. But there are 6,400 products that fall under AGOA. So when I was fortunate enough to be able to get to Washington, D.C. in 2015, not as part of an American Chamber of Commerce delegation, in fact, despite them. And we were able to listen to Obama's Africa trade rep. And at that time, South Africa was desperately trying to fight to keep American chicken, American poultry out of South Africa for a lot of different reasons. They had their own industry, hence we have Galitos, we have all the fast food here. KFC comes from South Africa. But and I realized, listening to Obama's trade rep, that these people are having genuine trade disputes with the United States. Because she said, I keep going down to their embassy and saying, if you don't let our chicken in, you won't be able to send Mercedes to the United States. Because South Africa exports Mercedes, BMWs, and Volkswagens to the United States. Most of the fruit now sold in Florida, used to be oranges in Florida, but it's all from South Africa now. Their agricultural sector is mind-boggling. That's great. And they have a huge dependence on AGOA for job creation. Because, let's face it, if you're sending oranges, they're not buying oranges elsewhere. They're growing them there.
Yep.
So as a result, they really are using that plan, that program. All we hear about in Kenya are sideshows. Oh, we're forced to take Matumba. Rwanda, look at how well they're doing. How well is Rwanda doing? Well, is everybody wearing a suit made in Rwanda? No.
Yeah.
Are they making buttons? No. But they don't import our Matumba. Okay, good. These are issues that we seem to get caught up in.
Yeah.
And I hate to say it, the media in this country allows itself to go around and around in circles about these side issues, which is not to say American media is any good anymore. Don't get me wrong.
What do you think of his speech, Ruto's speech at the assembly? He looked like a very Pan-African leader speaking.
It was an
about
excellent
issues.
speech. The man is a brilliant speaker. He speaks very well. It does, no, I mean, I've heard him speak in front of the European Union, Business Council and others. He's very persuasive. He's very, he's very charismatic, and he speaks very well.
I'm waiting for the but.
The only but is if you speak at the UN, what difference does it make? See, we keep missing out on what the UN is probably stronger now on things like climate control or climate warning and climate warming, or what we need to do to mitigate the effects of the change in weather. But look, the biggest funding agency in the UN, the United States, doesn't believe, our government does not believe that there's a problem with the weather. And everybody else is looking for ways out of having to meet certain quotas, certain limitations. Without the United States, which is now doing away with wind, expanding wind, it won't happen.
Yeah.
The Chinese, on the other hand, they put in solar all over the place.
Yeah.
And the only problem we have and we do have many problems with the Chinese, and there are problems that could get worse.
Yeah.
Only because of our bellicose relationship with the world and our notion that we have to go to war sometime.
Yeah.
Because right now China is being restrained from invading Taiwan. Because Taiwan is still relying on American guarantees.
Yeah.
What do you think about the decision to recognize Palestine? I don't think Kenya has done that. Has Kenya done that? Maybe that passed me. Well, I'm not surprised they haven't, although we don't know they have.
I absolutely don't know if Kenya has recognized Palestine, but there was a march, a really huge march and rally a couple of weeks ago that Kenyans showed love and support to the people of Palestine, and I think a lot of people contributed and sent, I think, as much as they could to help the people of Palestine who were being starved, and I think that show of unity with people not just far from you, but also people whose struggles can be connected to your own. That was a good message to send across the world. But at the same time, with Kenya's entire foreign policy just being up in the air, with kind of trying to go with the flow, not making any enemies, while also making actual enemies and shipping around arms with cocaine at our airport. There's just like too much going on in this country that I feel like some of these things are not being taken seriously, especially our foreign policy position is just a little bit all over the place. And it feels like we are not connected to the larger conversation of who we want to become as a country. Like the Kenyans themselves may be having that particular conversation, but I feel like the administration in place is trying to figure out their identity. So maybe it's tied to those charismatic speeches, but the connection to the work being done, I don't think I see it. Yeah.
Actually, Kenya did recognize Palestine as a state in 1989. So yeah, it was long ago done, I think.
Kenya has had a transactional foreign policy since independence, and which is not bad. If you're in a bad neighborhood, if you're in a rough neighborhood, you want to have as many friends as possible. But that has seen things like wars between the Israelis and the Iranians and the coast over smuggling oil from Iran. That has seen Libyan exiles, anti-Gaddafi exiles, being put into camps and when Smith Hemstone was the ambassador in 1990, to be repatriated out of Chad and elsewhere. At some points, Kenya was training Somalis inside the country, and there were even Kenyan Somalis who were ending up in hospital, wounded in fighting with Al-Shabaab. That was in 2009, 2010. So these things have been going on forever. And let's not forget that what used to be the Grand Regency Hotel was a Libyan investment under Gaddafi. So that's not all bad. It shows you can actually host U.S. delegations at the Grand Regency when it's owned by Gaddafi, and everyone's fine with that.
Yep.
But is there any follow-up? Is there anything happening? We have seen there are things that to be honest, I'll admit that I don't have answers for what's going on in the Middle East anymore, because it's been going on my entire life. And although we used to train with the Israeli Defense Forces, and my relatives in the way back when used to contribute money to the Palestine Fund as part of the Zionist organizations, that's over. When you realize that it was almost in 1992, I guess it was, when our barracks were blown up. 1980. Wow. 1982, when our barracks in Beirut was blown up. After we invaded Lebanon to put our troops between the Israelis and Hezbollah and the Lebanese government. Well, you can go on your fingers and say, what is that, 50 years? This has been going on my entire life. I don't have an answer, and I think the worst thing is for anyone to say that they do. Because right now there are extremists everywhere, including in Israel, who are not supporters, who are not really even supported by the people who are living there, and also terrible things have been happening in this war, terrible things. On all sides. And the side that should be doing better, which calls itself the most moral army in the world, is committing atrocities.
I reckon you said something before we went on about that. But something that happened when you were alive was 2024 protests in Kenya.
Yes.
Over 100 people dead over 2 years of protests in the country. Us looking at how it's happening, we see it as extrajudicial crimes all over. It's not how you control crowds. It's not how you stop people from showing up in the streets. You should allow them to show up in the streets and control them when they're in the streets, not murder them. From your perspective, as somebody who's been trained in the Marine Corps and knows their way around strategy, how did that look to you?
Well, it looked as if the security forces had lost control, that there was no discipline. In other words, that their command structures were faulty because they were using live ammunition very quickly. Also, in the past, we have seen large formations of police over the last 10, 20, 30 years confronting crowds. If you look at demonstrations in Korea or elsewhere, what do you see? You see large formations of police behind shields. When we were trained 50 years ago in crowd control in the Marine Corps, we were taught to stay in groups. Nobody was issued live ammunition, except for the squad leader who had a shotgun. And then we still had cameras, to take pictures of leaders. The idea was not to, but what happens in this country and has been happening since the multi-party days, the demonstration days, is the overuse of tear gas, the overuse of pepper spray and the like. And also, once again, I could ask the same question, is why do our police officers not have tear gas masks? How do you throw tear gas without having your own mask on? I mean, this makes no sense. And also, when you see the police going into places like Mathare and elsewhere, there's like a small group of police, and they come around the corner. They don't know who they're going to see. There could be thousands of people there. Also, the use of officers in plain clothes. The uniform is a symbol of the state. Having hundreds of armed uniformed police properly equipped is a symbol of the state. It tells you to go home without having to shoot people. Having people in plain clothes, who are they? And now we have this problem of hired goons, of hiring mercenaries to go beat people or loot shops. And this is not that we wouldn't have done it in the United States. We always used to like to say, oh, it's the looters, and we have to. But we're issuing shoot to kill orders. But here, it's like how many kids don't come home? How many people come home in bags? And then there's nobody held accountable. Not really. And so you have government-funded agencies, Human Rights Commission, indicated, and IMLU, giving you the statistics. And it's not going away. And then there are things called like ordinary crimes that are never being solved either. Jacob Juma, excellent 2016 KTN interview about the lack of forensic skills when he was found dead in his car on the way out to Karen. Joanna Stutchberry, third-generation white Kenyan who was ambushed outside of her house near Windsor Hotel. She was a warrior for trees. She was fighting to preserve the Kiambu forest. She's dead. Oh, and President Kenyatta said he was going to leave no stone unturned.
That's what you always say. That's what
yes,
you always say.
Esmond Bradley Martin, who was killed on his house on a Sunday afternoon. And next door was a Seventh-day Adventist church, and there was 20 acres of land, freehold land that he had purchased back in the early 70s. And this is a notable, globally well-known investigator into rhino horn, ivory smuggling, and the like, who is based in Kenya. Dead on a Sunday afternoon.
Charlie, what the police do, Justine, is when anyone tries to investigate, they stop them and make it difficult for them to even find basic evidence like cases or the bullets that are extracted from dead bodies. That was the same thing that Paul was saying throughout last year.
And also just even we saw with Alberto Jung's case, which was very, very obvious, like someone being picked up from their home and ending up dead a couple of hours later. And everyone just could tell this is extrajudicial killings, and they lied about getting him to hospital on time. And this was not even someone who was shot. Like, they just beat him to death. And this very case is being mishandled. The people who are around it, the people who are around not just the case, but the people who are in power, who are directly tied to it, are still in office. They're still operating like nothing happened, and it's almost being seen like Kenyans who are asking for justice are the problem instead of the system that continues to have these very, very outcomes again and again and again.
Speaking of Faith Odhiambo, I don't know if you're aware, Franklin and Justine, she just resigned.
Yes, she
from the compensation.
And then Arungu Houghton was on Situation Room this morning, talking about what his situation, which is being co-opted, which everyone is being co-opted, it seems, and it's hard to turn down $1 million shillings a month salary,
and sitting allowance,
and a sitting allowance. But nobody's knocking on my door.
I wish they wouldn't. But Justine, I want your reaction to that. To the resignation.
I think I didn't even expect her to be on that particular compensation committee in the first place. Her resignation is welcome, but at the same time, how do we stop patterns like this from reoccurring? The system is already rigged against so many different Kenyans, and sitting on the same panel where it's being coordinated by the person who's kind of protecting the people in the system who are perpetuating these particular crimes. I'm not going to say she took the easiest way out. I just wish she didn't have to agree to it in the first place, because she does understand the system. She does work in the system. Her position is very, very integral to the freedom that Kenyans are so seeking. So seeing her step out is good. It's welcome. I just wish she didn't have to take up the position in the first place. Maybe they should have given it to Andrew.
And I wish they wouldn't.
That's to compensate unknown victims, endless numbers of victims.
Yes.
Oh, speaking of actually victims, now that you've mentioned it, the word rings in my head now, because just received the news that starting tomorrow, the government will be cross-examining victims in court as part of a class action by International Justice Mission and a bunch of NGOs and human rights organizations. It's happening at the same time this compensation panel is coming to effect by the government. But over 80 people who were murdered, injured by the police, beaten up and disappeared in Nyanza, mostly, predominantly Nyanza region stroke protests since 2017. All those people came together and filed a class action suit against the police, and the case starts tomorrow. So I think that's something we should keep an eye on as we're looking for compensation.
Yeah.
I just mentioned it because it's something that hasn't reached the headlines yet.
I think Kenyans should be more litigious and more aggressive in protecting their own freedoms, and we've seen over the last year and this year just Kenyans stepping up to that plate and making sure that their voices are not just heard, but the system also follows through and respects the Constitution, and we hope we win. But speaking of which, what are areas where Kenyans need to show up?
So public participation this week, first of all, continuous voter registration. I don't know if you registered to vote, Andrew. I think you should. But continuous voter registration started on the 29th of September, which I believe was Monday last week. It's continuous. It's happening at IBS stations. I think there's a proposition to make it available at Huduma centers. I hear some Huduma centers have it. And also make it available at polling stations, which I imagine are high schools and chief's offices and a bunch of places.
I think a lot of people are very confused about where.
Yes, the where is a huge problem, but hopefully that gets resolved. That should happen before next year mass registration for the voting happens. Secondly, there is a bill at the Senate right now that needs your attention. Deadline for it should be in January next year for you to submit your views on it. But it's a bill that is meant to increase the number of representatives at, I believe, the National Assembly and Senate in view of the very violated two-thirds gender rule that is part of why governance and how governance should be run in the country. But it's something that you should give your opinions on. It's a bill available at the Senate. There is usually clerk at senate.co.je, something to that effect. But go visit Mzalendo's platform. They publish daily the proceedings at the Senate, National Assembly, and views that require your attention. Yes.
So if you're out there, register to vote, check all the bills on the Senate. They do have a bill tracker, just in case you're lost. You'll find the bill there. For me this week, as we wind down, one of my favorite stories is a TikToker. His name is Kaluma. I'm not sure if you've seen this story. He was taking care of his dad who had a stroke, and he used to wake up really early, work in tea farms. He was earning very little money, but he was doing his best trying to take care of his dad. So Kenyans came together and they did contribute for the well-being of his dad, taking care of his dad, and they also just helped him with all the resources that they need. They got him a bed. They got him all these different resources that he needed, and they left him with some money. And I think they're coming together to get him a scholarship too, so that he can further his studies. And I think that's a big win for the Kenyan community. I think we need more stories like this where Kenyans bypass traditional caveats that were set for them by people who they didn't even know, and just build community across different regions to help not just Kaluma, but if this could be the story of our nation going forward, this would be really cool. I'll give Andrew the last word though on what we should think security as going forward as a nation, not just like with our neighbors, but within our country. Like, what should we think security as, and how can we build it?
Well, you know, if you don't have an accountable police force, you don't have security. And I'm not going to say police service. This notion of changing using words, throwing them around and saying, oh, we made them a service, now they're not going to use force. But they were using even more force, having become a service. I think there's a real problem in that we do not hold the leadership accountable for not delivering a professional police force to us. And it's not as if there are ideas that haven't been used in this country in the past, including having a robust reserve. There are apparently the National Police Reservists who are trained in Manyani are very excellent, but they are basically guys carrying rifles. So, and you can have reserves who are in GSU, you can have reserves who are in NCIS. And CID. You know, you can have reserves everywhere, just like there is done in the United States and elsewhere, and which was done here. until the early 80s. I think that's what's important. Having having part-time police is exceptionally important because they live amongst the community. And it also allows you to surge your numbers without taking on extra salary burdens. But I also think that we're letting down our police by not demanding that the leadership take care of them. Not make excuses for them, but not take care of them. Because there's a lot of well-trained police officers, very well-trained, especially and very with advanced degrees and the like, as well as in the defense establishment. But I think everyone gets complacent because nobody is being held up to have to do something. And everybody's just going along and going along. And that's not tenable for a country, for an independent country at 62.
Yeah. Our needs are getting up there. We need to do better as a country, and I hope we continue showing up. So, Tom, any last word?
No. It's just that 7,014 voters were registered as of Thursday last week. I think those numbers should get better.
Okay. Step up your voting game, Kenyans. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Justine.
I'm your host, Justine. I'm your co-host, Justine. I will see you guys next week.